Welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour, and today is January 7th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've used for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. On that page, you can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through that worksheet process, and if you choose to listen to those, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your App Store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that, before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you choose to tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives, and secondarily because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. And if you have any of those to share with us, we would appreciate you doing so by giving us a call. On the Needle app, NEDL, you can find this in your App Store. And if you use it, if you download the Needle app, it will give you the option to type in a comment in the space provided, or raise a hand and actually talk to us live. And if you're listening through an archive, these days it's probably going to be hosted through the website at whyagain.org via Poditize. And if you are listening from to an archive version of this show, you can send us an email. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And when we get a comment or a question from you, we'll address it on one of our next live broadcasts, and then send you a notification about what day and time that occurred so you can listen back to the archive for your feedback or input. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody chooses to connect with us and ask a question or make a comment or refute something that's happening or give a testimonial, because it makes it far easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service, and that is just infinitely easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you and whether or not you're finding them useful. So remember, you could be listening to this broadcast through the internet at live.needle.com/drmichaelryce. And if you're listening live, thank you. If you're listening and you'd like to make a comment, you'll have to download the Needle app. That's NEDL. And from the App Store, it talks about giving you access to thousands of radio stations on the Needle app. And once you download that app and you're listening to this show live, if you favor this show or follow this show, then every time we go live, it'll send you a notification. And we greatly appreciate whenever you do that, because it helps us get the word out there about what we believe is this valuable work and the way it's transforming our lives for the better. And we'd like to continue the work of trying to make this available to every mind, heart, and being on the planet, as Dr. Ryce likes to say. And in lieu of anybody raising a hand or typing a comment, I will come back to the Course of Love, which I was beginning to read yesterday before we started our conversation with Susan. And in that reading, the reading was reminding us that we are sustained by the energy of creation. Some call it love. Some call it the thought of the Creator. Some call it God, God's thought, God's willingness to extend itself. And it reminds us that we're sustained by that creative force, even if we're not aware of it, even if we forget about it, even if we don't, quote, believe in it, close quotes. Just like a baby is sustained and its physical body is sustained by its heartbeat, even though the baby has no awareness that it has a heart or that its heart is beating. And the reading goes on to say the Creator's only thought is love. And this thought of love is thought without limit. It's endlessly extending in itself and creating. And because the extension of the Creator's thought of love is in place all the time, therefore you exist. And I exist with you in this self-same thought. You do not understand this only because you do not understand the nature of your own thoughts. You've incorrectly placed your own thoughts inside your body, conceptualizing them in a form that makes no sense. And when you apply your thought to learning, you learn. This reminds me of a line from Guy Finley. He says, the Creator put you in this world where whatever you focus on, whatever you focus your attention and intention upon, it will teach you about itself. And that's what this is saying here in the Course of Love. When you apply your thought to learning, you create the dynamic of learning. And it's always that way. It's always on. This creative force of your mind energy is always on and always creating. You don't have a choice. You can't turn it off. You do have the choice about where you direct it. Do you direct it towards learning and growing in love and compassion and surrender and allowance? Or do you direct it in the way of fear and contraction and division and judgment? So the text here goes on and says, let this be an encouragement to you. This is an ability that we can use together to learn anew. And that's what A Course of Love is trying to help us do. A Course of Love is trying to stimulate us to use the focus of our attention, our mind energy, for the purpose of learning and growing and expanding our capacity for love. The text goes on and says, you should be in a hurry only to hear the truth. And of course, all of the ways that you act when you want to hurry are backwards to what you would want to achieve. So let your worries come and let your worries go. Remember, worries always do not matter, except in terms of time, and that you will save time by letting them go. Remember that your worries affect nothing. You think that if your worries affect time and time is an effect, that time is an illusion. So time does not matter. Remind yourself of this as well. This is part of letting go of the world, the old world, to make way for a new. Realize these things do not matter, and they will not be carried with you to the new world, so you might as well let them go. It is as if you've carried heavy baggage with you everywhere you went, and in this fear that you might need something, and now you're beginning to trust that you will not need these things that you've carried. Oh, I don't need a heavy coat. I trust that the sun will shine. I trust that the warmth will surround me. Maybe you're an immigrant coming to a new world with all of your possessions in hand, and yet as you glimpse what was once a distant shore is now near, you realize that none of what you formerly possessed and called your treasures are needed. And instantly how silly you feel for having carted them from one place to the next. This reminds me of a story that Guy Finley would tell. Great king of a great land, and he had a son and daughter, and he sent them out to discover a new land. And he equipped them with an army and all kinds of wagons and horses and armor, and sent them out with a map to where to go. And they journeyed for days because their father's kingdom is extensive and massive. And then the days turned into weeks, and they're still within their father's kingdom. And eventually, the population starts to thin out, and the terrain is more rugged. And they see a situation that isn't on the map. There's a land structure that's not on the map. And so their progress is slowed because there's this great big ravine with very high walls, and it seems to keep narrowing and then disappear around a curve. And so the prince and the princess stop there, and they go to a high place to try and get a vantage to overlook the terrain, and there's an old man sitting up there way high up in a dusty old cloth. It looks like he's older than dirt, and he's just shaking his head at them, and they pay no attention to that. And the prince and princess come down and they confer, and they say, yep, we better send a few of our warriors down ahead first as a scouting party. And they send these 4 horsemen all geared up with armor and everything and spears, and they go down, they disappear around the corner, and all of a sudden there's this horrible noise, screaming, shouting, clanging, and all of a sudden the armor is being thrown back, and then the horses run, and then here come the 4 soldiers. They look like they've been, stripped and beaten, and they're all bedraggled, and they make their way back, and they tell the prince and princess that, hey, look, there's a monster over there, and it's got so many arms, it just rips our armor off. It's completely undefeatable. We're stuck here. There's nowhere we're going to go forward. And the prince and the princess think about it and what the father told them to do. And he said, well, Dad wouldn't send us to do this if it wasn't possible. So here, send 4 more people in. And this repeats several times. And finally, they go up to that high spot again, and they're trying to see if there's another way around. And here's this old man sitting up there. And he's just shaking his head and going, tisk, tisk, tisk. And the prince and princess are just furious. And they go and confront this guy and say, what are you doing up here? What are you laughing at? What are you talking about? And the old man says, you don't understand. And they say, we understand perfectly. We're here because our father sent us, and we got to get into that new land, and there's this monster over there, and we got to find a way to defeat it. And the old man says, no, that's not the way it is. That monster is not over there trying to defeat you. That monster understands what's on the other side of that ridge. And in that land over there, there are so many frequent lightning storms and so many other conditions that are contraindicated to wearing metal going through there. So it's trying to help you by stripping off what you don't need so you don't get roasted alive once you end up on the other side. And this theme of stripping away whatever we don't need, this theme of putting down our baggage, comes across from so many different traditions and so many wonderful stories. And here it is again in the course of love. Put down all of your baggage. Put down every negative thought you have. This comes from the Way of Mastery in the opening before we even get to the lessons, where it says, if you want to move forward on this path, You want to achieve awareness of connection to your source, do these three things. Put down everything you think you know, put down everything you think you need, and find a way to look lovingly on every place that fear has made a home in your mind. In other words, get rid of every negative judgment you have and you hold about yourself, about your past, and about the people around you. So here we are in A Course of Love, and it says, as you glimpse a distant shore and you start to see the conditions there, you realize all of these possessions that you carried aren't needed. You called them treasures, but they're just old wasted baggage. And you realize that you start to feel silly from having carted them from one place to another. And you realize the waste of time and energy it's been to carry such a heavy burden needlessly. What a relief to realize that you carry it no more. Put it down. Put it away. Let it go. Allow, surrender, release. The text goes on and says, you do not realize as yet how heavy your burden has been. Had you literally carried a heavy and useless trunk from one world to another when you'd been told by someone wiser that it would not be needed, you would be realizing the truth and ask yourself, wait a minute, what else have I been told that was wrong that I can disregard? You might try one more thing and then another that you previously would not have even tried because you were so convinced that you were right and the other approach was wrong. And as each new step is tried and found to work, your confidence in the wisdom of this teacher would continue to grow. You might consider that you could still learn from your mistakes, and you find that the learning in the end to be the same, and this is surely not efficient. So you might do it from time to time, but eventually you would realize that it would be quicker and easier to learn without the mistakes. And eventually you would realize also that the wisdom of your teacher has become your own. And this is what we promote so often in this work. We are not looking for people to follow or to believe. We are looking for people who engage with the teaching, not the teacher so much as the teaching itself, and learn to question anew, question for yourself, live in the experience of direct observation for its benefit. And the benefit is you begin to trust the wisdom of living in questioning, in direct observation. You begin to trust the wisdom of putting down the baggage and coming into this next experience of life instead of relying on your intellect, which is full of the teachings that have been poured into it from the past. Way of Mastery calls it, the trivialities that have been shoved into the intellect like garbage into a garbage can. Instead of relying on that, you're being invited to engage life with an entirely different user interface. This wide open, questioning, deeply honest heart. Breathe into and soften and question, asking to be taught moment to moment, all through life. Put down the beliefs, put down the dogmas, put down the traditions, engage life fully with a wide open heart. That's what we're invited to. The text in Course of Love continues and says, the urge to test another's wisdom is the urge to find your own way and have it be a better way. It is the urge not to trust the teacher in all things, but only in certain things. It is the desire to find your way on your own so that you can take pride in your accomplishment, as if by allowing another's map, the sense of accomplishment in your own arrival will be diminished. This wanting to do things on your own is a trick of the ego. Your pride is a gift the ego demands. These are the magic thoughts that oppose miracle-mindedness. These are the thoughts that say, I, on my own, am everything, rather than the thoughts that say, on my own, I am nothing. A true leader follows until she is ready to lead. She does not strike out on her own at the beginning before she knows the way. There is no shame in learning, no shame in following the course another has put forth. Each true course changes in its application. 50 students may sit in a classroom being taught the same lessons, and not one will learn in exactly the same way as another. This is true with the teaching and learning of information, and it's true with the teaching and learning of truth as well. The only way that you can fail to learn the truth is to demand to learn it on your own. For on your own, it is impossible to learn. So, the invitation here is to resign as your own teacher. Accept this course, this teaching as your teacher, and accept that it will teach you the truth. Find no shame in this. You cannot learn what you would be taught without a teacher, without a map. You've tried countless ways, and you can still try again, and yet you will not succeed. Not because you're not smart enough, not because you will not try hard enough, but because it's impossible. It's impossible to learn anything on your own. And in this way, I'm reading this as in isolation, believing that you're separate. We talked about this in the last few pages I read yesterday, that you're in relationship with life. You are part of this flow of the mind of the Creator. Let it teach you. If you create a belief of separation and isolation, and you create the reliance on your intellect to figure things out, Dr. Michael Ryce says it's the number one pseudo-solution of the non-being mind. I'm going to figure this out. Quit trying to figure things out and rely on a teacher, life itself. Rely on the teaching of life as you observe and you try and you observe and you try and you observe what works and what doesn't. It's only through union with the teaching that you will learn, because it is only in union with the teaching that you are your capital S self. All effort is based on disbelief of this truth. So what's effort? In the way of mastery, there's a lesson that says the way is easy and without effort. There's another lesson in the way of mastery that says all events are neutral. So if you take all of these teachings collaboratively, they're all pointing in the same direction. Stop relying on your mind to figure it out. Move into your heart. Use your heart, your wide awake, wide open, loving, trusting heart as your user interface for life, and ask to be taught by life rather than feeding the ego and its desire to be special. There's a line in the Way of Mastery right near the beginning, whether it's the first or second lesson. It says, this teaching says, put away every desire to be seen as special. Every desire to find favor with the Creator or earn your way into heaven. All of that is based on thought and errors in thought that have been compiled over generations from our cultures. Look at life as your teacher and understand that we're all in this together, and you've never been separate or separated from your Creator or anyone else. And this issue of wanting to be special or needing to be seen as being special is just your ego, which will only throw up roadblocks for you. So this ego demands the gift of pride. And this gift that your ego demands is not worth the price that you pay. The price of that gift is everything. Your pride will stop you from getting where you say you want to go. The text goes on and says, a teacher always has a role in the learning of the student. This does not diminish the student's achievement. you must realize it is your desire to make yourself your own creator that has caused all your problems. This is the authority problem. It is pervasive in the life of your physical form and in the life of your mind. It is only your heart that does not consider this an issue of concern. This is another reason that we appeal to the heart. The heart cares not where love comes from, only that it comes. This is useful to us in several ways. And by this I do not mean that there are not particular objects of your affection. This is not the love of which we speak. The heart yearns for what is like itself. Thus, love yearns for love, and love extends itself. To think of achieving love, quote, on one's own, close quotes, is ludicrous. This is why love is your greatest teacher. To yearn for what is like yourself is to yearn for your creator with a capital C. And when perception is healed, to create like your creator. This yearning exists naturally within you and cannot be diminished or satiated. Now, they slipped a little line in here that says, when perception is healed. Now, what do you think that means? Well, if you go back to the Way of Mastery, Lesson 3, it says your perception is a judgment. Your perception is always a limiting, distorted, highly filtered trickle of information. And by a trickle, I mean, Dr. Michael Ryce likes to quote the Harvard research that says, in a period of time where there are 10,000 units of electrical activity we can measure in the frontal lobes of your brain, where you're thinking things through, your conscious logical mind can only be aware of 9 bits of information. Maximum 9 bits of information. Your brain's processing 10,000. You get to see this trickle of 9 bits of information, and they're guesstimating conservatively that in that same period of time, like 1/25th of a second or some ridiculously small amount of time, there's probably 20 trillion bits of data hitting your senses. So this trickle of information is what we use to create the pictures in our mind and the meanings that we attribute to those pictures. And this is that very active process that we call perception. So what exactly does the Course in Love mean when it says, when perception is healed, you are allowed, or you begin to create as your creator? Well, did you know that your perception was diseased so that it needed to be healed? All these teachings are trying to point us to the idea that the perceptions that we create that lead us to judgments, that lead us to this belief that we're different, that we're separated from our creator and the other beings around us, these are all errors in thought. Michael Ryce would call them thought disorders. And you have a yearning to connect with love, and you have a yearning to create as your creator creates. And this was placed in you by the flow of life itself, by the energy of love itself. You can't get rid of it. The difficulty is you've been trained by your culture to believe that what you can make by rearranging energy that we call objects and by acquiring and accumulating things, that's the same as creating. And then the problem with that is you can only set up within your mind the desire to create or make the things that you've been trained by your culture and your family to value as important. And for most of us who take a step back and take a breath, we recognize that we're living in a culture which constantly, 24/7, 365, inundates us with thoughts and images and beliefs that we need to acquire energy which has been so lowered as to become perceptible to the senses in the form of objects, possessions, relationships, cars, houses, money in the bank. And that belief system, coupled with our active process of perception and the intentional, full-on, 24/7 conditioning from our culture, trains us, conditions us, brainwashes us to think what's important is the physical realm and what we can acquire within it. And this is where the work, whether it's Way of Mastery or Course in Miracles or Course of Love, as we're reading from today, is inviting us to something else. Dropping all of our beliefs and I just got a reminder from somebody to tell people that we should, if you're listening at live.needle.com/drmichielryce, if you'd like to make a comment or call in live, download the Needle app. And everything you need to participate actively in the show will be at your fingertips. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody does call in with a comment or a question, because greatly increases the probability that this show will end up in the highlight archives. It just makes it so much easier for us to learn together when we're interacting. So, in the absence of a comment or a question at this point in time, I'll continue the reading from A Course of Love. And the text goes on here and says, those who are seen as loveless and alone in the world are those you find to be the objects of your pity. Yet you do not realize that this is the state your ego has you endlessly striving to achieve. Your ego would have you believe that only when you need no one to achieve all you desire, only when you are satisfied with what you are and with what you do call your own, only then will your autonomy and your learning be complete, for that's all your learning has been for. The goal of this world is for you to stand on your own, complete within yourself. This goal will never be reached, because you are not separate or separated from anyone or anything. And only when you give up trying to reach that goal can you begin to learn of anything that's of true value. You are complete only within the context of your Creator and the creation, where you endlessly abide. Striving to be that which you can never be is the hell you have created. Lack of striving is seen as settling for less. This would be true if what you were striving for had some value. To strive mightily for nothing is still to have nothing and to end up with nothing. So striving, however, must be distinguished from struggle. To strive for that which has value is what this course is about. It has nothing to do with struggle. You think also that to leave struggle behind and to disengage from the conflict of this world that causes it is to turn your back on the real world and all that has meaning in it. In this, you think correctly, and yet you do not choose this option, thinking that it is to turn your back on your responsibility and on duty, and therefore you count this action as a noble one. This desire to engage in struggle has nothing to do with what you are responsible for. It is merely your ego's attempt to involve you in distractions that keep you from your real responsibility. Think again about your attraction to struggle. It is your attraction to the game, a game you hope to win, another chance to show your stamina and your strength, your quick wits, and your cunning mind. It is another chance to prevail against the odds so stacked against you that you can once again convince yourself that you alone have succeeded against mighty adversaries. It is the only way you see to improve your power and control over a world of chaos. To not engage in the chaos at all is seen not as desirable, but as a sort of abdication, a loss through failure to engage. Although you are well aware you will not win the game you play here, still you see the effort to do so, no matter how futile, as being that which makes up your life. To not engage is to not prove your own existence. This is what you have made this world for, to prove your separate existence in a world apart from your Creator. This world that you've created to prove your existence separate from your Creator does not exist. You've made it up. You're making it up constantly with your perception, your active perception. And you do not exist apart from your Creator, so the world can't exist and you can't exist apart from your Creator. In the end, your yearning for love is what tells you that this is so. It is the proof that you do not yet recognize. What could cause you to yearn for love in a loveless world? Nothing. It can't happen. Nothing can cause you to yearn for love in a loveless world. Guy Finley has a story he tells about how everything began because of something else. So eyes developed in creatures, single-celled creatures developed multi-celled creatures, developed organs, and the organ that we call the eye developed because there was light to be seen. Everything develops in relationship. You can't desire something. You can't, desire is not the right word to use there. Guy Finley says in that story, you can't truly need something that doesn't already exist. You can't need water to survive if there hadn't already been water. The physical body wouldn't have been designed to use water unless there already was water. This is what this reminds me of here when the Course of Love says, you cannot yearn for love unless love already exists. Nothing could cause you to yearn for love in a loveless world. By what means do you continue to recognize that love is at the heart of all things, even while it is not valued here in this world above all things? This is a fine example that means and end are the same. For love is what you are as well as what you strive for. Love is the means and the end. Michael Ryce is fond of using the line that says, every tool you engage produces results like the tool. Which is another really good reason over and over again to put down everything that's less than love, to cancel all the thoughts you have that are negative, to see them as false, to recognize that your painful, constricted, negative emotional states are best used as an alarm system to wake you up to the fact that in this moment, you're using your mind energy to create conflict and strife and constriction. And in that same moment, heaven is here. The active presence of love that you are can be known by you. And that's what we're called to over and over again in all of these teachings. Find a way to recognize that the stress and strife and conflict and negative thoughts that you experience have been programmed into you by your family, by your culture, by the generations of misperception and judgment and contraction away from love. And the only solution to that is turning toward love, to choose for love. Over the break, I was away, and I posted on Podbean the interview I did on Mindshifters Radio with Corinne Zupko, and she wrote the book From Anxiety to Love. And it's an award-winning book, and it's based on the idea that she distilled from A Course in Miracles and how she's actively used those ideas to create a system in her life to help her dismantle, you might say heal from, put down the mechanisms in her mind that she used for decades to create anxiety. And over and over again in that discussion and in her references to the book, she talks about the inner therapist. Some people would call the inner therapist the Holy Spirit. Some people would call the inner therapist my guide, my higher self. It doesn't matter what you call it, but the essence of it is, at one point, we were having a discussion about people who say, I'm going to turn this over to God. I'm going to turn this over to Holy Spirit. I'm going to turn this over to, etc. And they make that kind of a statement, and then in the next minute, they're obsessing about the negative thoughts or the anxiety. And so one of the things that Corinne came to was, I'm not going to turn it over to the Holy Spirit or my inner therapist or God. I'm going to look at it with my inner therapist. I'm going to look at this through the eyes of the Creator. Which puts me in mind of the way Abraham Hicks talks about it and says, when you look at someone or a situation in your life, and you judge it in such a way that generates a tension or a tightness or an upset within you, an anger or fear or a shame or a disgust, the tension you're feeling in that moment is created by the difference between what you're labeling and how you're judging the situation or the person in front of you and the way the Creator is in that very moment looking at the person or the situation in front of you. And if you want to get rid of the tension, all you have to do is take on the God thought, take on the same perspective that your inner therapist would have or the Holy Spirit would have. Take on the view without judgment, that crystal clear view without judgment or perception or distortion. Breathe and soften and open your heart, and you'll start to have a perspective that's closer to actuality, that's closer to the actual flow of life and creative energy. You'll start to see the world the way your Creator sees the world and sees you. So again, to make a comment or to call in, just download the Needle app. If you're already on, if you're one of our listeners on right now, let us know. How are we doing? Is this making sense? Do you have a question about the parallels between A Course in Love, A Course in Miracles, A Way of Mastery, A Walk in the Physical? I almost automatically went back to reciting a call-in number, but all you have to do is download the Needle app, N-E-D-L, from your app store, and you'll be available for a comment or a live call. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I'm reading a part of a comment from somebody that's asking a question. How do I balance? How do I balance what? And now here's a caller. Allende, are you there?
Yes, longtime listener, love your show. I wanted to ask you a question, Doctor. How do you balance, because I'm really enjoying the focus on love and letting go of worry, and all of us in our lives, I think, and I can speak for myself, have desires. So how do you balance um, the the what you're talking about in terms of love with having desires for something more? And
Okay.
I'll free up the phone lines. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the question. Every time we get a question like this, I like to start with clarifying the language. And what we're talking about, you know, we can say, oh, yeah, I know what he means. He says a desire. I desire something more. But unless we start to clarify what is the meaning, what's the definition you're using for desire, and what is it that you mean when you say more? More what? More stuff? If you want more stuff, physical stuff, these teachings say you'll never be satisfied. And if you want any demonstration of that, just look in our culture. Look at our millionaires who've turned to billionaires who are now in the race for who's going to be the first trillionaire, and they're gobbling up resources and they're hoarding money at a rate where if they would spend $1 million a day, it'd take them 1,000 years to spend all the money they have. And they're still not happy. They just want more. And if you want any evidence for how they're not happy, just watch some of the statements they make that are negative, they're pejorative, they're insulting to others, they're isolating themselves, or they're kind, whether it's a skin color or a nationality or an intelligence level, and separating themselves from other people. So to answer the question accurately, we'd have to say, what do you mean when you say more? And then there's the definition for the word desire that's really important. In this work, and of course in Way of Mastery, they spend an entire chapter, entire lesson, redefining the word desire. Most of us think of desire and we think about craving and obsession and fascination. And the Way of Mastery says we're using the word desire as this energy of creation that wants to express uniquely through you in each moment. It's this very powerful, subtle energy that most of us have never been introduced to and have little, if any, experience tuning into or being aware of. And so what we're asked to do in the Way of Mastery in the fourth lesson is practice some exercises that help us tune into that subtle energy of creation that is always there, it's always moving through us, and it's the energy upon which a desire for, oh, I'd like to own a horse, or I'd like to go climb a mountain, or I'd like to eat some ice cream, that those specific thought patterns ride in on this very powerful, subtle energy. And the Way of Mastery asks us to tune into that and to open to that energy. The other thing that strikes me about the question is to come back to this two-prong approach that we have in this work. The one-prong approach is to recognize your true nature as love, and as often as possible, tune into it again and again. Make it a habit, make it a practice, make it be with every breath that you ask to be shown your true nature, your connection to source, the true nature of the beings of brilliance and light that surround you. And they're there. Every person you interact with is a being of brilliance and light just like you. And if they're acting in a way that you would say is negative or judgmental or harmful, all that means is they've either temporarily forgotten or yet to discover their brilliance. It doesn't change their true nature when they act in a certain way. So on the one hand, we want to keep practicing refocusing on our true nature as love, this heart-centered approach. And on the other hand, we want to be absolutely more radically, deeply honest at deeper and deeper levels, so that every time we experience something less than love within ourselves, we take full responsibility for it, take a breath, get centered inside, and pick up a tool like the Reality Management Worksheet make your home in the breathing unity. Breathe, focus, soften, take responsibility for this, and find a way, like the Reality Management Worksheet, to map out what it is that you're doing with your conscious logical thought to create a belief that someone or something outside of you is causing your upset right now, and cancel everything you think you know and everything you think you want. Cancel every goal you have and ask something outside your conscious logical mind to give you a perspective that is broader, deeper, clearer. And in that way, we dismantle whatever we've been using to create the dream of separation from that loving energy that we call God, that we call light, that we call creator, that we call love. And so that's how I would begin to answer that question from Allende. And it would be, if he wants to raise his hand again or call in again, we could clarify the meaning behind his question of wanting more. And again, this particular two-prong approach has helped me transform my life more than words can say. Specifically, some words to point you in the direction of how well it's transformed my life is the more I've used this approach day in and day out, the more I've moved from a place to a place where I spend the tiniest fraction of time in my life these days experiencing the negative emotional states. When I recognize the negative emotional states as an alarm system, alerting me to the fact that there's something off the mark in how I'm using my creative mind energy, I can reassess, realign, cancel thoughts and goals, and move forward quickly, far more quickly than it was in the beginning of doing this. And the second way that I tell people to try and have an experience of how well this process has changed my life for the better is, these days I see so many different wonderful coincidences, little miracles, little connections that were probably always there, but I couldn't see when I would get myself all revved up into these negative emotional states. And as the more intensely I feel a negative emotion, the more narrow my field of view gets, the more myopic my vision is, the more I know how I'm right and you're wrong and it's settled, so why argue? And the more I cancel my need to be right, and the more I take 100% responsibility for the negative emotional state I create, or the tightness or the tension or the contraction that I create, the more my field of view expands. The more I soften and open, the more I get to see seemingly infinite possibility, a range of possibilities for how this is unfolding, and it will end up being a blessing to me. Or it will contain a lesson I need to learn to move forward in life. Or it will help me meet people I would never have met otherwise. People who could either be a blessing in my life or whose lives I could bless with my interaction with them from that space of love. And so by actively engaging this two-pronged process of focusing on my true nature as love, using the exercises from Way of Mastery. There's one that came to mind the other day where it says, if before every breath you recognize that you never encounter a stranger, that every person in every situation you're encountering is connected to you. You're infinitely connected to everyone and everything, that we're all just, as the old saying goes, walking each other home. And that you're not interacting with a stranger, you're interacting with another being of brilliance and light. And if there's anything less than love coming out of you or of them, it simply means that whoever's acting from a space that's less than love has either temporarily forgotten or yet to be aware of their true nature, of their brilliance and light. And that will start to change, radically change your experience in the moment and the interactions you have all through your life, whether it's a work situation or an intimate relationship or a casual friend or someone you meet at the grocery store or the gas station. So thank you, Ayende, for the call. We have about 5 minutes left if somebody has a comment or a question. If you're on the app, just type your comment in or raise a hand to talk directly for these last 5 minutes. And remember that if you're listening through the live.needle, nedl.com/Dr. Michael Ryce, DrMichaelRyce, if you're listening, you can't interact with us unless you download the Needle app. And if you download the Needle app and you follow the show, then every time someone goes live, you'll get a notification and the invitation to join us. The rest of this week, Michael and Jeannie are occupied with family issues, and there's a constant request for, prayers and blessings in their direction for their son Ryan, who's recovering and healing from a brain surgery to remove a tumor, and some of the ongoing healing adventures that they're having that have them back away from home. I think it's about 4.5 hours away from their home, to get more intensive medical care as he's healing. So they will not be live on Needle following this show. Hopefully that will resume soon. But the rest of this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, they will be broadcasting on Podbean. And it's a repeat of the shows on questioning whether or not we have free will. And there are 4 shows that will show up on Podbean. And if you follow this show on Podbean, I'm not sure if you'll get a notification, but they will be available. And we encourage people to access the Podbean and to stay in touch with the website, whyagain.org, WHYAGAIN.org, to get updates about the archives of these shows that they've been on various platforms since we've made the shift over from Blog Talk that we did for 14 years. So check the website, send an email to Jeannie if you have questions. Please remember to be patient about responses from Jeannie. I just got a text message from somebody that says the app isn't working. So if you get a situation where the app isn't working, please send me an email about that. We will send your concerns to the app, to the creators of the Needle app, and they'll keep working on getting rid of the bugs, because there are so many different platforms, and of course every time they do an upgrade to their software, as Jeannie Ryce has found out that with her app, every time Apple or Google changes something on their app store, there's a chance that they have to change something in the app to make it compatible. So if you're listening to this live or through the archives and you find the app isn't working, please send me an email and I will forward it to the creators of the Needle app, and they'll do their best to work out the bugs. In the meantime, I hope to be back again tomorrow at 11 Central, and I would like to remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Blessings, and please remember to check out the Podbean for the rest of the second hours of this week. Blessings.